State and local government agencies have made major strides over the past few years to modernize their back-end IT systems. But from the consumer's point of view, obtaining government services remains a cumbersome experience. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and here to talk about what some states are doing to reduce the friction are Jim Weaver, Secretary for Information Technology and State CIO for the state of North Carolina, and Beth DeSchepper, Vice President of Client Solutions and Product Management at PayIt Gov. Beth and Jim, thank you so much for joining us. And Jim, let me start with you. What hurdles do you and I'd say state IT leaders like you face in trying to simplify how citizens interact with state agency services?
I think the biggest hurdle we face at the moment is that we do not take a look at it from the perspective of the citizen, the resident of our state. COVID has driven us to the pandemic has driven us to a very much being online presence. But being online does not mean we're digital. And we're not going to get digital until we start looking at and changing that paradigm over to how is the individual who's consuming our services wanting to be engaged? How do we facilitate that experience? How do we make a different outcome for them in their journey in dealing with state government? And so I think until we're able to effectively do that paradigm shift, where we're focused on, at the end of the day, not necessarily here's our agency, here's our services, this is how you consume them, but rather focus on you as the individual are coming in need of government services. What can we do to make a different outcome? How do we facilitate that experience? How do we make it much more easier to enable that outcome? And part of that's going to be around, first and foremost, is we have a digital divide that exists, not only in our state, but in our country as well. We have to address the digital divide. We have to make sure that we have connectivity out there for everyone to be able to get reliable, quality, high-speed internet access. And that's first and foremost to try to continue to enable the digital services. We have to take a look at it from a cyber aspect. And this is not necessarily from the aspect of a threat actor coming in and doing something, but really at the end of the day, how do we start doing some fundamental things like, am I an individual? I'm an employee. I'm a resident of the state. I could be a business owner. Am I three things or am I still a thing? Right. And so how do we facilitate that aspect of it? So across all levels of government, we're not trying to figure out what user ID and password I need to use for this particular instance or case. Privacy is going to be an emerging topic in this area as well, as we continue to look at more and more services being made available online and the protection of that data. And then lastly, as well, is, at a state level, we do have a lot of legacy portfolio applications that are mission critical that need to get modernized to enable us to start moving to the cloud, to provide that resiliency, but also to enable that 24/7 type coverage and not having to do things in the evening hours called backups and batch runs and those kind of things. We still have a quite an extensive mainframe-based application portfolio here in North Carolina that we're looking to migrate away from as well.
Well, Beth, in light of some of those challenges that we just heard, how can state agencies and IT leaders make what I'll call the paradigm shift to reduce frictions that citizens often experience?
Yeah, I very much agree with Secretary Weaver's perspective that you have to focus on the citizen first. I think that, as I think about our agency clients and clients that we've talked to in the market, it's easy to be very focused on what I need to do within my agency or within my database and the rules that dictate those things. But if we think about the resident first, I think it brings up really interesting questions around data ownership and how does that experience work across that one citizen? Because as a person, I don't think that I'm in 5 different databases. I have one house, I have some cars, I have, some information with, if I have a business, I have some information with the Secretary of State, but to me, it's all the same, even though we all know in the background, it can operate along many different silos. And within each one of them, there's going to be rules around who owns that data and what needs to be first, second, and third due to whatever those processes are behind those silos. And so I think putting the citizen first would really break down some of those, hard to change processes that are kind of built within those systems natively, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So, Katie Beth, why are software as a service platforms seen as an effective solution for overcoming those disparate databases, as you describe them, compared to more traditional web applications that a lot of states are still working with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all struggle with different priorities on our very small resources. And so if we build everything internally, then that's going to, maybe we will see the light at the end of that tunnel, the paradigm we're looking for, but it's going to be way down the road versus being able to buy some things. And you have to be very selective in terms of, again, that focus of the citizen, which I think is why being able to kind of decouple the front end from the back end, kind of the back end systems meaning like your system of record within a DMV or a Secretary of State. If the front end experience is separate, then you kind of can create a beautiful, I don't know, kind of like a swan on water. You can create that nice experience for citizens, and they don't need to know that in the background you might be modernizing silo A from silo B in terms of the system's record. They just see a beautiful experience. And I think that's another reason why SaaS can really allow these processes to change faster and keeping that citizen at the center.
Well, Jim, I know you're taking on a number of innovative initiatives in North Carolina. Talk to us a little about where you're seeing some of these modern SaaS solutions really helping to improve the customer experience for government agencies that you support.
Yeah, I think Katie Beth said a key word there, and that was agility. I think first and foremost, the pace of change that we're seeing across the technology landscape, every 6 to 12 months, there's new and emerging technologies that are out there. As a state workforce level, it's very difficult for us to continue to keep up with the pace of change. And especially right now, we're looking at the challenges of getting vacancies filled. As an example, we're currently sitting at a 14% vacancy rate in IT here in the state of North Carolina. And we are competing with the Research Triangle, among others, Apple coming to town as well. And so the likelihood of us being able to fill all those vacancies is probably the odds are not in our favor to do so. Let me put it that way. So I think the agility that we get through software as a service opportunities is great. The transition away from a traditional capital X or CapEx model to a more of an OpEx model, I think is the other benefit, as it will allow us to go ahead and not make long-term investments, but make those short-term investments at the time when we need to make those investments as well. And then, ultimately at the end of the day, it truly is, and state government, the color of money does matter. So depending upon funding sources as well, and how we're allowed to use those funding sources, we just can't use funding and in the big melting pot, if you will, and use them across the board. We have to be very purposeful at times, depending upon that originating funding source, of how those dollars get applied for audit trails and cost allocation, those types of things. So I think what happens here at the end of the day is really, we're really looking to start engaging more with our vendor community. I think they can bring a lot more innovative ideas. At the same time, they're doing these things already in the private sector as well, so we can build upon those lessons learned. And again, going back to, it's about achieving different outcomes for our residents of our state.
Well, you certainly make a great point that it's not just the technology, but how you address some of these skill and talent shortages that are inevitably going to be a challenge for state and local agencies. And certainly these technologies seem to give you a leg up in that effort. I guess I'd like to close with just asking both of you, where do you see the most significant opportunity going forward for state and local government agencies to leverage SaaS solutions towards a more connected and digital government? And what recommendations would you offer leaders to also improve public service delivery at large? Katie Beth, maybe you could take that one first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, being able to go with some agility is being able to really focus in on centralizing that citizen first with a separate front end from a back end experience, because these back end systems can't live forever in their current state. They will have to be modernized, but that's disruptive, and you don't want a citizen to feel that disruption. I think the second piece of having that separation between front end and back end, that also allows the front end to have AOTA and ADA front and center. So thinking about all types and walks of life to be able to have access to online capability services. My daughter's in a wheelchair, so like I think about how disabilities and how do I get her to do something online is so much easier than taking her to somewhere where I have to think about stairs. But if we think about online today, I mean, that is allowed for everybody. They have screen readers, et cetera. So making sure that we really keep that citizen at the center not only helps in terms of citizens not feeling any friction, but also being able to serve all types.
Well, thank you for sharing your personal perspective on that. I think that's an important consideration. Jim, your additional thoughts?
Yeah, and similar to Katie Beth as well, I also have a stepdaughter who's special needs and disabled as well. And I've seen firsthand the challenges that my wife has gone through in working through services and the need to engage government. So I think at the end of the day here, it's really, and Katie Beth was talking about this a little bit, is putting yourself in the shoes of the customer, right? At the end of the day, a former state that I've been associated with, the number one use case was son and daughter returning home to take care of elderly parents. Right. So if you think about somebody moving new into a state, and the first thing everybody thinks about is I need to change my driver's license, my vehicle registration. You start thinking about school districts. You start thinking about where am I going to live? My employer, what kind of childcare facilities are around there? What's the rating of those childcare facilities? What's the public transportation like in that area, if that's something of interest to you as well? So you think about all those things that come with you moving new into a state, and fundamentally, yet we have not even begun to address the real reason you're there, and that is, I need to take care of my elderly parents. What are the services that are available for them, and how do I streamline that process? So I think at the end of the day, it's really about how do we start mapping the journey of our residents of our state as they engage with government services. You know, you think about the Amazon experience as an example. You know, my wife goes out and shops at Amazon. It's a totally different view for her than when I go out and shop at Amazon because our interests are in different areas. Why I go versus when she goes. You think about the Domino Pizza experience, right? I can actually see where my pizza is visually depicted as it's going through the process. Why can't we at government bring those things together and give that kind of an experience to our users here, our residents of our states at all levels of government, so they can actually know where a facilitated experience, but they can also visually see where things are in the process. And we're giving them that constant feedback of information to them as well. So that way I didn't interact with government and it's caught in a bureaucracy. I can actually see that things are progressing along. And so that's kind of what we really want to look at. Katie's correct. Decoupling the back end processes is a huge win. But we can do so much more to have that experience up front for our residents, our citizens of our state. And then more importantly as well, based upon the data and what we're seeing from a usage pattern, we can also sit there and suggest other things that could be of interest to them as well. No different. You might qualify for a human services program, but hey, we saw that you have indicated in your interaction with human services, you might be now eligible, you might be pregnant and you're now eligible for WIC program and benefits. So how can we move you into that direction as well? So again, also providing that more comprehensive information out to our residents of our state so they can make much better and more informed decisions.
Well, Jim Weaver and Katie Beth DeSchepper, thank you so much for joining us, sharing some of your insights and best practice recommendations on how to make the consumer experience a more satisfying and productive one for government customers. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
So much.